Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Tuesday, May 20th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Some National Weather Service offices currently don't have enough workers to cover overnight shifts. That's including the Hanford office.
The concern is that without this 24/7 staffing and without a meteorologist, the monitoring is left to neighboring offices.
We will learn what is behind these staffing issues and the potential effects for you in just a few minutes. But first, these news headlines. A 15-year-old girl was stabbed on Monday inside a high school classroom in Porterville. Police say they arrested a 19-year-old man who's believed to be the suspect. The stabbing took place at Menachie High School just after 8 a.m. According to police, the girl was stabbed in the leg but is making a recovery. Authorities believe the suspect entered the school alone and attacked at random. The incident caused the school to go into lockdown as police responded. A Fresno area agency that conducts a census of the homeless population says homelessness has grown in the last few years. KVPR's Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado tells us just how much.
The Fresno Madera Continuum of Care conducts a regular count of how many people are without shelter in the region. This year's count estimates the homeless population in Fresno and Madera counties has grown by 3%. That's since the last count in 2023. This information is critical for the counties in order to submit to the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. That agency provides funding to regions trying to combat homelessness. This year's homeless count was also conducted as local governments have been given authority to ban homeless camping outdoors. Local officials say a final report on their count will be released later this summer. For KVPR News, I'm Crescencio Rodriguez Delgado.
California legislators are considering a bill allowing ranchers to compost livestock carcasses. Cap Radio's Manola Secaida has more.
When livestock die here, there are limited options for disposal. Ranchers can send them to rendering facilities that process livestock carcasses, but there's only a handful that do so in California. Ranchers who don't have that option sometimes create open-air pits where carcasses can decompose, but that can attract predators like wolves. Kirk Wilbur is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the California Cattlemen's Association. He describes composting as a reliable option.
There are 42 other states that currently allow cattle carcass composting throughout the country. So, California is not reinventing the wheel here.
The bill would allow ranchers to compost up to 100 cubic yards of organic material on site, including the livestock remains. Wilbur says that equates to about 6 to 8 cattle carcasses. In Sacramento, I'm Manola Secaida.
More than 1,000 Merced County employees are getting a 10% pay raise. County supervisors approved an agreement with a union earlier this month, according to our news partner, the Merced Focus. For months, workers have pushed for pay increases and lower health care costs. The roughly 1,700 workers are represented by the Merced County Employees Association, Local 2703, and United Public Employees. A large golf course in Fresno may soon close to make way for expansions at the Fresno Yosemite International Airport. The city of Fresno owns the Airways golf course, but officials tell the Fresno Bee the course may close for good in the next few years. That's due to a terminal expansion happening at the airport to accommodate more travelers. Those plans also coincide with expansion plans for the neighboring California Air National Guard base.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Body 20 in Fresno's Fig Garden Village, offering full-body electromuscle stimulation training sessions. It's a high-tech, time-efficient way to help preserve and rebuild lean muscle. Each 20-minute one-on-one session is guided by a certified coach using FDA-cleared technology. Body 20 accepts health savings account cards. More information available by searching the Fig Garden location at body20.com.
And now to our main story. There's been no shortage of catastrophic weather events so far this year, from winds in LA fueling historic fires to devastating tornadoes blowing through Kentucky in recent days. During times like this, the National Weather Service is critical in keeping the public informed about the role weather plays during natural disasters. But the federal agency that oversees these weather offices, that's known as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is facing staffing shortages. Earlier this year, when the Department of Government Efficiency began a federal overhaul of agencies, probationary employees at NOAA were among many who lost their jobs. Now, those changes are rippling to local communities. The National Weather Service office in Hanford has historically been staffed around the clock. And just as we enter wildfire season, overnight shifts have been eliminated because there isn't enough staff on board. And a federal hiring freeze is only complicating things. To get a read on this situation and what it means, we spoke with Scott Dance of The Washington Post. He's a global weather reporter who recently highlighted these staffing shortages. He starts by explaining exactly what the National Weather Service does.
The National Weather Service is responsible for issuing forecasts, obviously, across the country. It's also responsible for issuing warnings in times of severe weather, whether it's a tornado or a wildfire or a flood of any kind. That all falls on these meteorologists to, just be responsible for. Their mission is to protect lives and property. And there's thousands of employees across the country who take that very seriously.
Before we get into the details of your recent reporting, I just want to say, the big picture is that there's a staffing shortage right now at the National Weather Service, but I think it's important for you to explain to us how we got here.
The National Weather Service has offices all across the country. There's more than 120 of them, where each one is staffed by maybe 10 or 15 meteorologists who work shifts around the clock to, just make sure these warnings are being issued, to just issue forecasts for aviation safety, all of that. And so even before this year, some of these offices had some, relatively short staffing. They also all had a lot of looming retirements, a very old workforce. So this year, when President Trump took office again, and, had this focus of really reducing the cost and size of the federal government, they offered buyouts, early retirements, as well as fired some employees who were still on a probationary status. And because of that, a lot of these offices went from, having 10 or 15 meteorologists to having, 7 or 8 maybe. And it just meant that they can't cover as many shifts a day. They, are just kind of working that much harder to just maintain around the clock weather forecasting and monitoring.
So I think the overarching narrative has sort of been that DOGE and the Trump administration has sort of gutted these federal offices. How much of this staffing shortage can we attribute to that move versus the writing being on the wall with those looming retirements and such that you mentioned?
I mean, the retirements, some of these retirements would have happened regardless of DOGE, doing what it's been doing, but it would not have happened in this fast of a timeline that is now presenting some of these Weather Service offices with such critical short staffing that has developed just over, the past month or 2 or 3. So over a 15-year period from 2010 to 2025, there were about 600 retirements or just departures from the National Weather Service. What we have seen just in the past 3 months is that same level of staff reduction.
So pretty major. Now, you write that 4 Weather Service forecasting offices no longer have overnight meteorologists, and 2 of those are actually here in the Central Valley. The office is in Hanford, which is the local office for our station, and Sacramento as well. Could you tell us why those positions are not being staffed and why that's significant?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the result of, what different offices had in terms of, who was ready for retirement or who was a relatively new employee who was probationary and therefore could easily be fired. The concern is that without this 24/7 staffing and, without a meteorologist in this office or, in the Sacramento office or in the Hanford office during these overnight hours, The monitoring is left to neighboring offices. So say like the San Francisco office or the Los Angeles office or Las Vegas, like any of these neighboring offices will sort of pick up the slack. But the concern is that what if there's something unexpected? For example, another one of these offices that is so short-staffed that they can't operate overnight is in Eastern Kentucky, and there were storms that produced what seems like a very violent and long-track tornado. They were able to see that in advance enough that they could staff overnight and they could stagger their shifts so that the meteorologists could be there and make sure it was covered. But if there was something unexpected, that might not be as easy to do.
Sure. Do we have an idea of the Weather Service's long-term outlook right now? Will they eventually be able to fill most of these empty positions? Any word there?
There's definitely a hope that they will eventually get this exemption to the hiring freeze. I've heard multiple times over the past week or two that they're really pushing for this, and the political people within NOAA and the Department of Commerce, which is the cabinet level agency that includes all of these offices, are making the case that, this is dangerous, as wildfire season is starting in California, as hurricane season is starting, on the Gulf Coast and in Florida and on the Atlantic coast. There is not a lot of room for error in these offices. And so they're really trying to make that case that this really is a public safety issue. And, people say, well, why can't you just forecast the weather from, the National Weather Service headquarters in DC? Like, why do they need so many meteorologists in all of these offices? And it is a job that takes a lot of people if you want to really make sure that you're keeping people safe, that you're, staying on top of every risk. And in these offices, they know the local hazards, they know the geography and the different phenomena that can come at different times of year. It takes a lot of that specialization to do this job really well and keep people safe. And we kind of take it for granted in a lot of places.
Scott Dance, global weather reporter for The Washington Post. Thanks for breaking this down for us.
Thanks for having me.
We reached out to the National Weather Service for comment on these shortages. An official declined to give an interview, but did offer a statement. In it, they acknowledged the changes to their services and said the agency is committed to mitigating staffing impacts. They also added that recent weather events, quote, clearly demonstrate the continued accuracy of National Weather Service forecasts. And that is today's show. If you have been impacted by changes to the National Weather Service or another federal agency, let us know. Email podcast@kvpr.org. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. You can find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you were going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.